Broadcasting from the studio at the Levan Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University, welcome to Levan Center Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, innovators, and those that foster the Florida business ecosystem.
Hi, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome the subscribers, and thank you so much for listening. I'm Jim Ryan. It's 2025, and as they say, new year, new you, and a little play on words with exciting changes that are happening here at NSU. And first, I'd like to welcome Kelly Shanley, Interim Director for the Levan Center of Innovation. Kelly, thank you so much for doing this podcast with us.
Great to be here with you, Jim.
Well, there are exciting changes, as I mentioned. Thrilled to have our next guest on our podcast for 2025. No stranger, one of the few guests that actually knew the building that we are located in. He's been here many times, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Harry Moon to the podcast, who has taken office now as president of Nova Southeastern University following President Hanbury. Terribly exciting time. Congratulations on the new appointment, Dr. Moon.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me this morning.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and I want to kind of format the show a little bit in the podcast because we talk to civic leaders, people that have built businesses, founders, those in the academic space, and so forth here on the podcast. And you've checked a lot of those boxes. In your history as a medical professional, a doctor, a successful entrepreneur yourself, and certainly leadership roles here at NSU. And one of the things, though, I think that the community wants to hear from you and perhaps other faculty and staff and so forth, business leaders, is your vision not only for the university, but to hear a little bit about the Dr. Moon story. Before all the credentials of president and doctor. So if you can, take a few minutes to walk us back in time a little bit about your story, your family. So why don't we start with your background and where you originally grew up?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm happy to do so. I grew up in a small town in Alabama, about 5,000 people or so, and 2 railroad tracks, and our family had been there since territorial times. But be that as it may, my next-door neighbor was the general surgeon in the community at a 25-bed hospital. He had trained at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, fine institution, great medical program, but he had chosen to practice in a small town in a rural setting. And I knew early on I wanted to be like him. And so I talked to him as time went by. Our families were close, about being a surgeon, about what it was like, why he did it, and I was fortunate enough that he was a great help to me and a great model for me, and gave me a job at the hospital. Had the lab technicians teach me how to prepare certain blood slides for interpretation, and even how to look at the slides and identify certain cells and things of that nature. And then over time, I learned to take x-rays and develop them, and the old wet techniques, and the fixator, and the developer, and the fixator, and the washing them and drying them in dark rooms. Anyway, along the way. So I knew early on I wanted to be a physician, and I knew pretty well I wanted to be a surgeon. Then, I went, my parents were, particularly my mother, was very focused on education and the power of education. She was an educator, and that instilled in me and my sister, older sister, that education was the great liberator, the great equalizer, and the path forward. So I went to a boys' school in Birmingham. That was a preparatory school, but I was fortunate enough to have a great role models there. One of which was my instructor teacher in English literature, that developed my love of literature and thought, and the human condition as it's recorded and retold over time. And but also I was very fortunate to have a great athletic coach who was a member of the 1960 Olympic Games in Rome. He was a decathlete, and he coached me and several of my classmates to a pretty high level in athletics, basketball and track and field primarily. And that was the vehicle, really, that got me into college. We were very middle class. We had some land, but we didn't really have any money. And so I was fortunate enough to be recruited by several schools, and one of those was Tulane. And I chose Tulane because of its educational reputation. That I knew that I wanted to, and my coach and others told me, there's life after all this, and get the best you can. So I chose Tulane, and that was a good decision. And there I was well prepared in freshman year from my experience in high school and that I attended. And I became an English major. My focus was in modern poetry and T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound and William Carlos Williams and those folks. I did all the other stuff, the biology, the chemistry, the biochemistry. Took 5-hour calculus as a freshman. Met every day, 8 o'clock in the morning. So I wasn't very smart about choosing my schedule, but it was my first semester. I made all C's and 1A. I made an A in English. I made some very, very hard-earned C's. In my second semester, I made all A's and 1B. So I made it through New Orleans. And anyway, so after that, I wanted to go, obviously, to med school, and applied and was accepted in a relatively new med school in Alabama, University of South Alabama, and had a great experience there. Then my next goal, I knew then I wanted to be a surgeon, and I had by marriage a relative who was a pretty prominent plastic surgeon in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Great place to be.
Yeah. So I applied in the match, and indeed I matched at the University of Hawaii's integrated surgical program, where I was under the mentorship of General Tom Whalen, a forerunner in use of the saphenous vein, which you know about in heart revascularizations, but it really had its origins in the Korean War in salvaging wounds of the lower extremity, where they would be amputated in the past, but by using this as a conduit, as a pipe, could salvage limbs, and it led to other things. But he was a fabulous mentor. And towards the end of my time at the university, he came to me and he said, "Look, what are you going to do now? You're going to be a general surgeon." And I was then fascinated a little bit by cardiovascular surgery as well. I said, "Well, I'm I don't know which way I'm going to go." And he said, "Well, I'll write you a letter. I'll help you in any way I can, but you need to let me know this afternoon." So he was that kind of a military leader.
Sure.
Yes.
And he taught me a tremendous amount about organization, about attention to detail, about thoroughness. It was he was instrumental in my career. So I told him that afternoon that I wanted to do plastic surgery. And my goal was to come back and join my relative in Honolulu and practice plastic surgery. But my relative trained at a place called the Cleveland Clinic and wanted me to go to Cleveland and train in plastic surgery. So I applied. I got accepted. During the end of my program there, the faculty approached me and said, "Look, we'd like you to join the faculty." And I went, "Well, okay. I got another decision to make." But the decision really was, it was an opportunity, and I'm not a big fan of sports analogies, but, I could, a chance to play for the Yankees.
Sure, absolutely.
Or the Red Sox or the Dodgers, right? It was the big leagues. And I said, okay, if I'm going to do that, then I really want to learn something and contribute and be on the edge of what's happening. And so there's this fellow that, doctor that was leading the reconstructive world in plastic surgery. His name is Ian Taylor at the Royal Melbourne Hospital in Melbourne, Australia. And I said, I really want to train with this fellow. So through various conversations in a meeting I had with him, I was invited to train with him, and I was the first Yank to train with him in Melbourne, as he had trained many people from the UK and from around the globe in the emerging field of microsurgery and moving tissues from one part of the body to another, using the little artery and vein that supplies that tissue and moving it to a new place, and with vessels that are 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. So it's done under a microscope. This is called microsurgery. And little sutures about as fine as the human hair that you sew them together with. And he was he really instilled in me what it was really like to be a clinician, a researcher, and an educator, and having the most inquisitive mind I've ever been associated with. And so I returned to Cleveland. I set up the microsurgery department, introduced it to the Cleveland Clinic. The biggest anxiety I've ever had was the first operation that I did on someone, and it had to do with a wound of the head and neck where there was exposed brain tissue and such. And if it didn't go well, it was not going to go well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And fortunately, it went well, and the patient did well. And then one day I was called by the head of cardiac surgery that they had a problem with a patient that had a wound infection. And wound infections after open heart surgery are never good. Mm-hmm. And there was a large fellow. He was a big executive with the motor industry, within the auto industry. And his heart was being covered by sponges with antibiotics on them. So with some of the techniques that I learned in Australia, we got the heart covered and moved some of the chest wall musculature over that. And anyway, he walked out of the hospital. And in those cases had about an 85% mortality rate. Generally, they did not go well. Anyway, that operation with that surgeon who was the head of cardiovascular surgery, his name was Fred Loop, and he was a giant in cardiac surgery and using the internal mammary artery as opposed to the saphenous vein to revascularize the heart. The problem with that is in diabetics, the cartilages of the chest lost blood supply and didn't live. Wow. So there was a wound healing problem with those patients. Anyway, so whenever that was the case, I got called. I worked with him, and we got to know each other pretty well. He went on to become the chief executive officer of the Cleveland Clinic. So one day, not one day, but every year there's an annual professional review. And during my review, he was there and a couple other big folks within the organization, and I said to myself, this is either going to be good or bad. Right? And so anyway, they said, Harry, we want you to think about Florida. And I went, Florida? Tell me about Florida. So they said, the Cleveland Clinic is, we are going to establish a presence in Florida. We would like for you to be part of the team to go and get this organized. And so that opportunity was the first real venture into the business side of healthcare. I came down as a surgeon. We were having some trouble recruiting physicians and retaining physicians. So I was asked to become the chief of staff. And the chief of staff, really manages the professional staff. And then shortly after that, operationally, I was asked to become the chief operating officer of the organization. And we had a hospital that was on the beach. We had a site that was remote from the hospital where our clinical activities were. And I was hiring doctors from all around the world. Went to Toronto and to Quebec in the middle of winter and recruited doctors away from the University of Toronto and sick children's and the like. And then one day the CEO that was here was a cardiac surgeon Carl Gill, who was at the Cleveland Clinic, left, decided there were greener pastures somewhere else. And I got a call one Saturday that from Fred Loop, he was the chairman CEO of the clinic, that I was going to be the CEO. So then I had further, and my business education was none, zero. So it was kind of, seat of your pants type things. So we built, and I took over, or managed, and take over, managed the fledgling operation, and then started to develop what we know is here in Broward County, the Cleveland Clinic in Weston. I built that, hired a project manager, learned about construction management, what it took in facilities and design, and tried to create an atmosphere of, for want of a better term, of healing hospitality, so that it wasn't as clinical but as inviting, as soothing as we could make it, and that sort of thing. Then we built a facility in Naples, and the institution grew. So I guess in summary, to get back to a little bit of the question you asked me, I've been very, very fortunate to have opportunities or doors open in front of me that I never planned, and whether I had the good luck or the great fortune to walk through them. And so it was the only pre-planned part of it was my next door neighbor when I was young that got me that I wanted. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because I was sitting here thinking about how intentional some of your steps were on the way forward, because you've added all these dimensions to your career, stepping sort of out of medicine into leadership and management, into entrepreneurship. So can you talk a little bit about those different dimensions of you and how you chose to develop them?
Yeah, because the next stage of things. So with the career, the Cleveland Clinic went into a partnership with a for-profit entity. And it was a difficult management situation where there are two different worlds. One, the for-profit, commodity traded, they are a quarter-to-quarter business. Mm-hmm. We are long-term in our vision and our care and a different focus, and the environment wasn't right for me. Mm-hmm. And so I called Fred Loop, and I said, Fred, I'm not your guy for this.
Yeah.
Right? And he said, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think I'll just retire. And he said, great, okay. He said, but, you have a lifetime appointment to the Cleveland Clinic, which I still have. I'm still on the faculty or the staff here in Florida. And he was very gracious in that modality. So then I did change gears a little bit. I got involved with, I had been on the regional board of Barnett Bank, one of Florida's banks that ultimately was bought by Bank of America. And so I learned a little bit about banking and the finance side of running the business of medicine. And so when Barnett went away, it was a shame because they were big, but they were a local bank. So with Wayne Huizinga Jr., Terry Stiles, Tommy Miller, Keith Koenig, a bunch of people. We got together and organized a bank. And with a smaller community bank in Naples, we merged our new institution, decided to take it public, which we did on NASDAQ. Initial offering, we raised $12 million, $10 a share. Had a secondary offering, raised about $20 million. The stock price rose to over $20 a share, and we became about a $500 or $600 million asset bank. We were here in Naples, we were down in Coral Gables, we were in Tampa, and Boca, and we were primarily a community bank. And then there was some I won't say disagreement, but not a convergence of strategy about what facet of banking we should be in and where the risk was. So I left the board. I cashed out. I was the vice chairman of the bank and blah blah blah. Ran the compensation committee and such. And then that was in 05. 06, 07, 08 hit, and the world changed.
Yeah,
It certainly
for
did,
sure.
especially if you were in banking.
Exactly. The world changed, and so that was a great experience, a great learning experience on just financial management, managing risk, assessing value, and return on investment, return on assets, return on equity. So I learned those things. It was still a learning process. And then I went really from when I left the clinic, I went into private practice. I restored a historic building in downtown Fort, right off Las Olas, built a surgery center. And my oldest daughter, had followed my footsteps. I went to med school, went through general surgery, went through plastic surgery, trained in craniofacial surgery at Nicholas Children's, and was going to join me in practice. And I got a call from a headhunter about a job at Nova Southeastern University. They were looking for a chief operating officer. And I said, well, I'm very flattered, but that's kind of out of my wheelhouse. And I'm happy right now. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm the good and bad of working for yourself, and meeting payroll and still having some little investments here and there and doing some things. Then I got a call from the general counsel of NSU, wanted to have lunch with me, and I talked about the job and this, that, and I said, well, it's really out of my wheelhouse, and higher education. I've done healthcare. I got that, right? Yeah. And you guys have got a fair amount of health. I got all that. Then I got another call, and it was George Hanbury, whom I'd known when I was running the Cleveland Clinic when he was city manager. He had tried to get us to build the Cleveland Clinic that we built in Weston on the site right off 95 where the big Walmart is and such, near the new sheriff's office and things. And so we had lunch, and I still wasn't sold, on taking this on. So another month or so went by, and I got another call. Wanted to have lunch one more time. And
it went from chicken to steak, maybe.
Yeah. Persistence.
And at this meeting, George was not exactly happy. He really wasn't. And so I said to him, well, why do you want, why the persistence? I said, well, look, we would like you to help us, particularly on the healthcare side and what we're doing. And the reason I would want you to be the chief operating officer so that you would have a big enough hammer to get things done at the university and blah, 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 right? So George said, I said, well, to George, how long are you going to be around? If you're going to leave next week, the whole game changes, right?
Sure.
I don't know if I want to do that. he said, well, I'm going to be here for my contract for another 6 years. Well, my daughter was going to be finishing all of her educational program, residency, in about 6 years. And I said, well, timing is okay, right? I can make this transition. And there was another doctor that wanted to lease my space. And so I said, okay, I'll see what I can do to come in and help. And then, as I began to learn about the universities are complex enterprises. And the fascinating how the melding all takes place. And worked on better organizing our clinical programs, our healthcare. We had an emerging new allopathic MD medical school. We had a well-established and very functional osteopathic, the DO school. We had the fabulous dental program that really was a major force in head and neck surgery and cancer surgery here in Broward County. The pharmacy school, the nursing school, all of that I was home there. Okay, it was very, very, very comfortable and ground where, and I knew where everything was. Admissions, enrollment, financial aid, facilities management, the IT, the technology of how we do things today, the Oceanographic Center, all that. I learned a lot. I brought in some consultants and to determine, because I didn't know a lot about that. Sometimes it's good not to know, because then you can ask questions.
Yes.
And to learn about it. And so I said, well, in enrollment, they had more people in enrollment than anywhere else in the university. So I said, well, how many do we need? Or how do we know how many widgets, how many things do they do a day? And,
sure.
And I said, and how do they do that compared to their peers? Who does it really, really good? Right? Don't know. So I brought in a consulting firm to compare us to other universities and how many people they had doing certain things. And there were some differentials. Okay? And so we began to change some things. And then it became clear to me that the single biggest threat to higher education was the cost or the debt of education. From my own daughter and family, I all went to private schools, right? And so we paid our fair share, and we paid for all of our kids' primary education. And so that was writing a lot of checks. But so other families were as well. So I started to think about that and how we function as an organization, blah, blah, blah. So then I'm going to get to the end of this story.
It's a great story.
It is a great story.
So then 4.5 years in, I get a call from Charlie Palmer, the chairman of the Board of Trustees. And he says, the succession committee, has been meeting, and we want you to consider succeeding George Hanbury. Well, I hadn't thought about that, right? I was going to transition back, and there were great expectations from my daughter and what was going to be the future, and I had to ask, the true boss, my wife of 41
That's
years.
right.
Okay,
Good thinking.
and she wasn't thrilled about the possibility, even a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so when is enough? Blah blah. All those things, and so Charlie called me about a month or so again and said, "How are we going?" And I said, "Well, we're not there yet." And he said, "Okay, what can I help? What's going on?" I said, "Well, Anne-Marie's not, and if she's not supportive, then I have no desire to have, after this amount of time, discord." And he said, "Well, do you want me to call her?" And I said to him, "Charlie, that would be a very bad idea."
I was about to say you didn't, did you?
No, but then another month or so went by, and we were having dinner, my wife and I, and she said to me, "Why do you want to do this?" And I said, "As I see the university and all the assets that we have, the university has, particularly in healthcare and others, there are certain things I think I can do that will be very beneficial. And if I can do that, it would be worth doing in this amount of time remaining." And she said, "Okay, I get it. I'm in."
That was the pitch.
That was the pitch.
That's great.
And
That's
so
great.
that's why we're sitting here today.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Yeah, that's right. For sure. That's sure. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Moon, you've got so many great experiences, and you talked extensively and sharing those about moving in these different capacities, the challenges, becoming an entrepreneur yourself. Our audience, that a lot of them are aspiring entrepreneurs, they're founders and so forth. And I know for sure, besides the wonderful stories that you shared, maybe a couple of key learnings that were sort of epiphany moments for you, that you becoming an entrepreneur, and maybe what you could share, those aha moments, and maybe these were pivotal changes that you had as you started your business.
Well, I learned in surgery in particular a very important lesson, and is you cannot be afraid to fail. Okay, that if you don't venture into it, you can't succeed. So it's really a fear of failure, I think, holds many decisions back or alters those decisions. And I think that it's good to dream big. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And that resources ultimately go to where they are best utilized. And that if you are, and you got to be honest with yourself. You can't, believe your own hype. And we do have, each one of us, amazing capacity that is, the potential is there. And and along the way, from the athletics, from the coaching side of what you can achieve, right? And yeah, God gives you some gifts, but how you exploit those assets. And I think that in having a lot of ideas are good. I have a lot of ideas. Some of them are really pretty good. Some of them are terrible, right? Some of them are dreams that they're not going to come true. But it's good to have those, and it's good to have help. It's good to have mentorship. It's good to have models that you can follow and model yourself after. And it's important to throughout my career, I would not be where I am if it weren't for the folks along the way that gave of their time, their energy to help guide me, help challenge me, help support things along the way. And so as we look at we're here in the Innovation Center, fabulous facility, it's world class. Those are the things that I think that as we draw this part of the equation of the university together, that I would like to see increase. And they are step by step. They aren't quantum. And that the potential, again, is enormous. And that's just here.
Yes.
We could talk about the Oceanographic Center or Ocean Campus and the opportunities that are there. We could look at each of our graduate and undergraduate programs, and really our strength is in our graduate and professional offerings. But to get back to your question, those are some of the things Fear of failure.
Fear of failing.
If you don't ask,
Great
you don't-
nuggets to pass on for sure.
If you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to ask for help. Right.
Well, there's also a good piece of being aspirational and dreaming and having vision. And you've had a little bit of time to think about what your vision is for the university. Tell us what's on your mind, what the future looks like for NSU from where you sit now.
Yeah. Well, I have inherited a wonderful platform, which and the creation. The balance sheet is strong. In the balance sheet, not just financially, but in our physical assets, our facilities, our programs. And now I think it's the time to exploit those assets. That we will exploit our healthcare side, where we are primarily today on the teaching side, the educational side. We will create a partnership with an existing entity to become a true clinical entity. I personally believe that the best health care it comes in an environment of research and education. So we will expand and improve that, and with that comes greater financial stability because we are augmenting our revenue sources from tuition to other ancillary revenue, further strengthening the enterprise. We will leverage that strength, say, to have the finest healthcare law programs in the country that we can offer with our business school, every healthcare professional, a business curriculum. I never had one. Would it have helped me along the way? Yeah, right? So that as they become into the business of healthcare, that they have some knowledge of that. The same, we should have the strongest law program in healthcare law and jurisprudence. Our psychology programs are part of medicine. The whole, anxiety of the world and our coping mechanisms and resiliency in our youth and our students can be improved. One of the crown jewels of this organization is our oceanographic program, both from its geographic location, its research activities, that we can be a leader from the sawgrass to the seagrass, that we can be a leader in developing the best path forward in coastal resiliency as things change, that we can exploit new professional researchers such as John Englander, who is a world-class climatologist and has studied the climate in Greenland for decades. And his foundation has merged with the university, the Rising Seas Foundation, and we will become more involved in studying those areas of the world that are affecting what happens on our coastlines. We have the largest university presence of any university in the state of Florida. We have 8 regional campuses. We're also in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and we have a campus in Denver, Colorado. We will exploit those assets with programmatic development, clinical programs. We today graduate more professionals, more physicians than any other university in the state of Florida. In the not too distant future, we could graduate more physicians than any university in the country. Florida is the 4th largest economy in the United States. New York, California, Texas, Florida. In Florida, Florida itself is the 15th largest economy in the world. Of Florida's economy, the Tri-County area, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, it's the biggest economy in the state of Florida. We're incredibly lucky. So with those advantages and where we are foundationally as a university, we can and we will become later this year designated by the Carnegie Foundation as an R1 university.
Fantastic.
We're spending $50 million a year in research today, and we graduate far in excess of the number of PhDs required to reach that designation. So we will leverage that opportunity to really have a profound change in the world that we will never see. So that is part of what's worth doing, what I'm trying to do, or what I see and what I think we can do organizationally.
Well, maybe with some of these medical advances, maybe we all see it as
that's
we
true.
we all age and hopefully stay healthy. So, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the word quantum before, and we had a conversation the other night about AI and artificial intelligence. We're in this sort of fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
Broadcasting here from the Innovation Center, tech. A lot of it's AI today. You must be incredibly excited about the opportunity for, again, you mentioned quantum, artificial intelligence, involved in medicine, involved in so many aspects. What are your thoughts about the university embracing AI? How do you think AI is going to be used here in the educational systems?
Well, worldwide, it's the new wheel. It's the new printing press. It's the new telegraph. Whatever analogy you want to place on it. It will, in healthcare, for example, the ability to take significant amounts of data and analyze that data, so that if in an individual with a lot of variables, to come up with a true differential diagnosis, what could be the problem, with all this set of data, can be instantaneous. Today, you got to think about it a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll help physicians understand that. And then with the accumulation of that data, with those set of circumstances, what has been proven most effective for that worldwide? Where are the sources of this data? Today, Medicare and Medicaid and the VA system. Vast quantities of information, of treatment, results, compliance. All those things will be of an instant aid, in the near term. Okay? And other uses. But the ability to take data and analyze it in a meaningful fashion boosts science tremendously. It takes bias away. It takes away a lot of the problems that we face in normal experimentation, where you have a hypothesis, you create a model to test that in studying and what's most effective. And as we learned today we know the human genome, but we don't know how that genome really works, right? We know 2 cells come together to become millions of cells that are highly differentiated. Some become the lens of your eye, some become the little bones in your ear, some become your taste buds from these 2 cells. We know that certain critters, salamanders, you cut off their limb, they can grow a new limb.
Yeah.
Right? Starfish, you cut off one of its limbs, grows in it. So we will learn more or have the data about the genome to understand the interactions and interconnectivity that will allow a differentiated cell, specialized cell, to become de-differentiated, embryonic, that can then become more differentiated today. Today, with all of the work on stem cells, we still can't make a stem cell be something we want it to be. We can't make it be a pancreatic islet cell to make insulin, right? We can't make it be a myocardial cell to replace damaged muscle tissue that lost its blood supply. So those are just part of the data. But as we do that, this is, I think, really very, very important. As humans, as what we are, and the university itself, we must be cognizant of the other aspects of the human condition, of how we interact, that our communication skills, our ability to interact must be fostered. And it's critical in doing this, and particularly in the healthcare area, that we develop, nurture the humanism that is critical. Otherwise, the great fear of AI is it being existential. And if we become existentialist, then that's a failure. And we will be in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
Not a good place to be.
Right.
Nice circling back there. Yeah. So, in all of this, in light of what you're talking about there,
Yeah.
in light of your larger vision for NSU and where we're going, where does the Levan Center of Innovation factor into you achieving that vision?
You know, I think it's part and parcel with it. It's hand in glove. I want to, aside from in the importance of helping innovators, people with ideas, and the things that we do from the ideation to the incubation, acceleration. I mean, the basic, business things that we will become very good at. What we will become, I hope, good at is one of the things that I'm going to create and base it here, for want of a better term, is going to be the NSU think tank. That we have our own McKinsey group that can look around the corner, that can look and understand what other universities around the world are doing and why they're doing it, what is successful in those programs, and how we can utilize those to decrease the cost of education or to compress the time for education to achieve the same end, to have a product, and to help the university better use its resources. Those same folks can help us in the Innovation Center, help innovators as we look at trends. And just like you have actuaries that can figure out certain things with certain data, right? That they can become actuarial in that capacity. They can look to see what the job market they think will see based on these data sources and interpretations across, so that we can be more predictive and have better predictive analytics in the whole process. And that will help the Innovation Center. Yesterday we saw a great example of that, a wheelchair that's been created for the caregiver as opposed to the person in the chair. You think, well, gosh, why didn't somebody think of that before? Well, because they didn't. But so I see NSU. You look at Florida, just what I said about the economy, just how lucky we are to be here. We can be the leader in that area. We can be the leader not only here in Broward County. We can be Silicon Valley. We can be the nidus of this, or the central hub, or the nucleus, however you want to, look at it, and disseminate that very easily across our geographic spread in an interactive way, that either in person, by video, by various means, we can share, interact, data, information, and help. And I think we have the agility to do that better than anyone else. And I think the overall, as we look at things in a broader perspective, that if we can learn and understand how, and each person learns and acquires things differently. It's DNA.
Yeah.
So we can better understand how to deliver information, how that's retained, how that's assimilated, so that we can become, a program that is truly for the individual and for the entrepreneur. So I am firmly committed, and I discussed last night after yesterday's meeting at the Innovation Center here that in healthcare, where we have substantial activity, a lot of people, that we will create in NSU Health our own fund. And let's say we start with $100,000. That our leadership there will be involved in things here of that nature. And if investment opportunities arise, if nurturing is needed to achieve a certain end, that we will be participatory in a meaningful way and show, a couple of things to the world. We're in. We've got skin in the game, and we want to see this move forward. And so did that answer the question?
It sure does.
Yeah.
Sure does. Yeah.
And that's terrific. And, as we wind down, I know that, carving out this time right now, I know you're working on strategic planning, working with Kelly on, the vision for the Innovation Center here, certainly putting your thoughts together and working with a lot of the faculty and staff on the vision for 2025 and beyond. So I want to thank you so much. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Again on the task at hand, being named president. And then I'd like to announce Kelly and I, with your blessing, are going to continue the podcast here, talking with entrepreneurs and civic leaders and sharing the good news, the good stories, narratives about what's happening here at the Levan Center. So look forward to that. And thank you again, President Mood, for your time and your contributions here.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and be assured that I'll be here to help in any way I can.
Terrific to hear. Thanks again for being on the podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Center Live podcast and follow us on all social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the podcast, please email Levan Center Live. Our email is innovation@nova.edu.